Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. I was watching a short Dungeons and Dragons skit on either Instagram or YouTube Shorts. I cannot for the life of me remember which. But the general gist of it was a games master complaining that his players were overly cautious in a dungeon, that they were checking every square for traps, they were checking every door for traps, and it was slowing the gameplay down. And then the player said, I wonder why that is. And it moved to a flashback of the previous session where a player goes, okay, I'll open the door. And the games master says, okay, that's triggered a trap and it's turned all your gold coins into, roll of dice, spiders. And yes, I think that traps in Dungeons and Dragons are a missed opportunity. I think they are not implemented in a particularly good way. Now, one thing I have to mention is I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the creator that put that skit out. Otherwise, I would link to it. This is due to my dandelion mind. And as soon as there's a breeze, all the good ideas flutter away. So if I find it, I'll link it in the comment. And to whomever the creator was, I'm really sorry I forgot your name, but I do like your work, and I thought that skit was very funny. Okay, enough of that. Traps. I don't think traps are done very well in Dungeons and Dragons. I think they could be a more interesting gameplay element. Now, why do we have traps in Dungeons and Dragons? There are two really good reasons to have traps. A story reason and a gameplay reason. The story reason is perhaps the easiest because they are cool. They fit in with the scenario, especially in dungeon contexts. Perhaps the greatest examples of these are from the Indiana Jones series. That opening in Raiders of the Lost Ark, exploring the jungle temple with all the different traps, the pressure plate activated blowguns, the giant boulder rolling down the cave, threatening to squish Indy. That whole opening sequence is full of traps and it is undeniably cool. I think one of the best sequences in cinema history. Traps are cool from a storytelling perspective. From a gameplay perspective, it is a way of creating peril and a way of attrition. Dungeons and Dragons particularly is an attritional roleplay game. You will have encounters that cost the players resources. And those resources could be hit points, it could be spell slots, it could be something else. But the way the game is designed is that through a typical day, there should be perhaps 8 or 9 encounters that cost the players something. And the gameplay loop is prioritizing which resources to spend and how to spend them. And any hit points you lose from traps are hit points that you can no longer use in combat. Any spell slots you use to cast spells to bypass traps are now spell slots you cannot use in combat or other encounters. But I don't like the way that this mechanic is implemented. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you may get the sense that I don't like attritional roleplay games. And whilst attrition is important, you have to have a degree of attrition in there so that player characters are vulnerable. If they enter every encounter with full hit points and full health, then there's not really a sense of peril. But if you focus on attrition so much, you end up with such a conservative play style that there's less fun, there's less heroism. So the compulsion to check every door for traps, to peek around every corner in case there's an ambush waiting for you, it slows the gameplay down to a glacial crawl, and it trains the players to to have less fun and be more cautious? Is there an alternative? There's a great quote that I really like from a YouTuber called Ryan Macbeth. He's an army vet, but he's primarily a security consultant. I think he mainly works in cybersecurity, but he's mainly a threat consultant, and he seems to know what he's talking about. And he has this great quote. He says, "You shouldn't give your enemies problems. You should give them dilemmas. A problem has a solution. A dilemma has two solutions, both of which are equally bad." I think this is a great attitude to take into Dungeons and Dragons and other roleplay games. But just remember, in this context, when we're talking about adversaries, we're not talking about our enemies. We're talking about the dungeon master and his players. His players is not their adversary, but should be perhaps treated that way. Don't give your players problems, because problems have a solution. If you say, "Here is a trap," the solution is disarm the trap. And okay, that's fine. "Oh, there's a trap. I'll disarm the trap. Roll the dice. The trap's disarmed. Off you go." That's not really a great gameplay loop. Even if you are the party rogue and you are there to spot and disarm traps, that's not exactly fun. On the other hand, if you give your players a scenario in which there are two bad things and they have to choose which one to deal with, and there will be negative consequences irrespective of which choice they make, that's a better role-playing situation, a better role-playing story. So how do we change traps? Well, the first thing that we should do is have traps signposted. If there is a skeleton pinned to the wall by dozens of crossbow bolts, you can be fairly sure that if there's no place for crossbowmen to be hiding, there's probably some traps that shoot crossbow bolts. So signpost traps, let people know this is an area that there are traps in. The second thing we need to do is we need to make sure that there is an alternative to the traps. If you go this way, you will face the trap. If you go the other way, there is some kind of other obstacle or hurdle to get past. Okay, so now we give players a choice. I love giving players choices, and a good choice is one where there isn't an obvious right answer. So the players should be able to look at the choices given to them and have some means of weighing up the odds or assessing the risks of each path and then making a choice on that. But if you have two corridors and one corridor is filled with skeletons that are pin-cushioned by crossbow bolts, and the other corridor is lined with cushions and has a big diamond at the end, then you're kind of signaling that one of these choices is better than the others. No, you should be able to give your players two different choices, both of which have clear costs and rewards. What the alternative choice is up to you. It could be a chasm without a bridge. So can you bypass the traps or can you bypass the chasm? Which path will your party take? And the third point is that both options have to have costs associated with them. If one of the options can be bypassed without cost, that is always going to be the better choice. Now, the costs should perhaps be different. A trap may cost you hit points. And even if you disarm or disable the trap, it should still cost something, but it should have a lesser cost associated with it. So if there's a corridor with traps and you have a rogue who's very good at disarming traps and they make it safe, then there is no cost associated with that choice anymore. On the other hand, if You can disable some of the traps to make it less dangerous. There's still a cost. And your wizard on 3 hit points might go, that's still too much of a cost for me. I can't pay that. So now it still makes it an interesting choice. The other path, it might have a different cost. It might not cost hit points, it might cost time, it might cost money, it might cost spell slots, it might cost goodwill. But make them have different costs so the players can't go, well, that one's going to cost 2d6 hit points and that one's going to cost 1d6 hit points. We'll take that one, it's better. When you can't compare apples to apples, it brings in an extra set of reasoning. It brings in an extra level of thought. And each player might prioritize things differently. Taking 2d6 hit points when you're a barbarian is very different than taking 2d6 hit points of damage when you're a sorcerer. So setting up a situation where your whole party has to compromise about which cost is worth paying and which one isn't, that's good gameplay. So, to summarize, how would I change traps? Well, rule 1, signpost your traps. Let players know that there are traps there that they will have to deal with. Point 2, always have an alternative route with a different type of hazard, with a different cost. Rule 3, both alternatives have to cost something, even if you're successful. Traps that are disengaged should still be hazardous to players and have a potential hit point cost. On the other hand, the alternative path should always have a cost, even if the players are successful. If there is a dangerous village they have to negotiate with, even if they are successful in the negotiations, it should still cost something. Or there should be a time cost that changes the balance of a later encounter. Or there should be a gold cost, or a cost in spell slots to bypass something. So there should always be a cost with choices. There should never be a free option. Even that rogue should still take damage from the traps, but their skill reduces the damage rather than completely mitigates it. So, would that make traps more interesting? Would that make traps a better part of a dungeon? I think so. I think a lot of fun is lost by players being overly cautious. And I think a lot of potential gameplay choices are lost by making traps worthless if they're too easy to completely mitigate. So, but that's me saying traps should be obvious, but traps should be more dangerous. That's perhaps an unusual take on the subject, but I think we can have more fun with games by following those 3 steps. Signpost your traps. Make there an alternative route with a different type of obstacle, but make both routes have a cost that can't be entirely mitigated. That's the way I'd play. And as Ryan Macbeth said, you should be giving your players dilemmas, not problems. So that's how I'm going to start doing traps in my games. Let me know what you think of that idea. And irrespective of what your next game might be, have fun playing it.